So Pat Boreskie is PGY5 in Manitoba, who's graciously lent us some time despite, I'm sure, a very hectic study schedule. So thanks, Patrick, for doing it. He was one of our Digital Scholars Fellows this past year and did some incredible work as part of that fellowship. And we're really grateful to have him on board. So Pat, I'll let you take it away and talk a little bit about some of our metrics.
Thanks so much. Don't make me feel guilty for not starting studying yet. Let me just throw this PowerPoint up 1 second here.
Yep, you're good to go.
Excellent. Awesome. Hey guys, my name is Pat. I'm the digital scholar from this past year, and I'm one of the chief residents in Winnipeg, Manitoba in the EM program here. I'm so glad to be here. I felt very flattered to be asked to present on some of the content that has come out recently, especially during the pandemic, which ended up sort of serendipitously being my sort of niche during the Digital Scholars program. Speaking of which, I just want to give a very quick plug to it, and I know Fareen's going to talk about this later, but if you don't understand the analogy or example, a good news folder on your desktop is something that a mentor taught me a while ago as something that is really going to keep you fresh and keep you happy even during those tough or challenging times. And it's a folder on your desktop that you just throw all those really nice emails you got from someone thanking you, or an opportunity you got, or a publication you got, a screenshot of a message you got about how that was something cool that you did. My year through the Digital Scholars program has really just been a list of me feeding things into the good news folder because of this amazing set of opportunities that I've had. Rather than just being sort of a hard curriculum, it has been more so all of these opportunities to get involved in projects that I'm not even sure how I would have met these people without the program. And if you have that opportunity, you're recent staff or you're sort of a senior resident in EM or a +1 program, I so recommend it. I can't speak high enough about it. Something that it gave me the opportunity to study was how CanadiEM and posts that were related to COVID or not actually sort of bloomed during the time of the pandemic. And though this isn't going to be news to anyone here, there seemed to be this increased buy-in for social media. So I wanted to give you a little overview of what I've been doing. And for a while, I was kind of obsessive about this, but checking the Google Analytics for the website to see how we were getting increased viewers during these uncertain times when people were turning to the internet. The platform is a little overwhelming if you don't know each of the sections, and truthfully, I still don't know many of the parts of it, but this is what it would look like. You can see the geography of where the users are accessing our site. You can see the time of day that sites are more popular. You can see, of course, the new users, how many times users are accessing our sites. If someone comes to our site, are we retaining them day to day? It's fascinating. It's certainly too much information to really go too in depth with. But something that's interesting is when you just track our unique page views over time. So a unique page view is basically just a user that accesses the site one or more times during a session, which is a day. So it just doesn't duplicate people that are coming back multiple times in a day. But if you look at 2018, which is here in orange, compared to the blue, which is 2019, you can see that we certainly grow year to year, and that in general, there aren't massive spikes off baseline. This is a pretty continuous thing as we put out good content. Something interesting happened during COVID, and this is a much shorter time frame, of course, but I just wanted to show you this blip in the radar. But during COVID, you see here first, maybe in mid-February and certainly in mid-March, there was this growing number of unique people who were coming back to CanadiEM. And you're going to have to allow me a little bit of artistic leeway, but you can see that many of these new users, this wave, so to speak, sort of continued, where there's been much more growth for CanadiEM during the pandemic than would just be explained by our annual growth. And part of that could be a reflection of the content that we had published related to COVID. So this was a post that we posted mid-February. This was a primer, and it was sort of a catch-all of information about COVID as it unfolded, the pandemic. So this was sort of as things got really scary in North America, we decided to make a post that would have content on PPE, what we know about the virus, why it's relevant that it came from Wuhan. All this information was in one place. There was a lot of interest from healthcare providers, but also a lot of interest from lay people. People were interested to know more about this, and we became this resource prior to many other foam sites for getting updated information, and we updated it over time. It's been a while now as things got much more settled. An infographic was also sort of a big thing that I was involved in through the Digital Scholars program in the pandemic. This thing blew up on social media, and it was sort of recommendations of the do's and don'ts when you're intubating someone with a highly infectious disease. And this was getting like 1,000 unique views per day actually at its height, which was quite an enormous success. And of course, this primer, the amount of work that must have gone into this can't be understated. And I just did one of the small pages for it. The team that set this up, though, it's so important, especially as we unfortunately enter some increasing cases over the next few months. So the interesting thing that I find about this is obviously pandemic COVID material is going to be super popular, but even posts that weren't originally COVID related also increased during this time. So I wish I could give you tons of examples. We don't have time for that, but I just want to show you something as simple as a topic on hyponatremia in the ED. I don't even know when this post was originally posted. It's clearly older than February 2019, but look at the consistency of its 2019 track in orange compared to 2020. You see that there's obviously more interest through February, March, April, it settles a little bit. And then there's just this continuous boom. Maybe this was because it was right after the primer that it was sort of republished or at least retagged. But I just love seeing that you can use the pandemic as this opportunity that we've always had relevant posts that are continuing to be relevant as people turn to how do we care for people in the ED? How do we remobilize ourselves to a different department? Maybe they came from internal medicine and suddenly they find themselves in the ED, or family medicine into the ED. Just fascinating. The other part that I thought was cool was sort of how we're blooming with new users and international interest. So this chart is a different metric. Again, this is new users, people who have never come to CanadiEM before. And you can see that as we move into March, there is certainly a wave of new interest, of fresh people coming to CanadiEM for the first time. That's awesome. That's how we build this community that has been growing since 2016, I think was said. What does that mean in Canada? 40% growth in the small time period before and after we started publishing COVID material. In international markets, some of them are astounding. In the Philippines, which is actually our number 6 country for people coming to the site, it grew by 156%. Very cool. Speaking of sort of the international following of CanadiEM, I went down a rabbit hole for a little while of searching for our COVID content on CanadiEM on Google Images, knowing that one of the points of foam is that other people will take it and incorporate it and republish it in their own local settings. You ended up with examples from Thailand of someone who apparently is quite a notable microbiologist, I believe, in Thailand, posting on his Facebook page CanadiEM content. How cool is that? You had this was a emergency doctor in Ontario, I believe, who had posted a tweet about her and her PPE and how exhausted she was. And I looked up and then I see what is clearly an edited CanadiEM infographic in the background. And, you know, of course, we want credit for things that we've put our time into, but that kind of misses the point when you realize that free open access medicine, the point is to propagate this learning, send out this education, and get people adapting what you've already done for their own local centers. This is perfect. And this was a tweet that was tweeted like tens of thousands of times, ended up on CBC National that she was interviewed. And there we are as a community practice. So cool. One other example before I conclude, and this is more for kicks than anything, but there even was an infographic from CanadiEM that was tagged on the Addicted to Dance Facebook page. I don't follow Addicted to Dance, of course, but this is just some random small dance studio, I believe, in the States. They were letting everyone know that they were very disappointed that classes were postponed. And here's how you integrate your COVID patient. So cool. Isn't it awesome that we have this amount of reach as a community? So what I'm trying to say, guys, is CanadiEM is obviously riding this wave in interest in free open access medicine. Our content has always been there, but with this pandemic, all this uncertainty that's happening with it, it's created much more buy-in for this type of academia. So keep doing what we're doing. It's obviously going to be always a struggle to fight stagnation and to keep innovation, but we got to do that to keep out of the froth. So keep working with each other to get motivated, be novel, ask for help. We're going to keep watching these metrics swell. Thanks very much, guys, for having me.
Thanks, Patrick. That was great. That was really great. I love those examples of the COVID infographics. I know here, like at VGH and stuff, we had those infographics up as well. And I think often one of the questions we ask ourselves is, what is the role of foam in changing patient care? But I think that's a great example of a positive change. And the work you did with those COVID posts and infographics definitely were a highlight of this past year.